Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 439 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Lindsay, and this episode is another in the How We Eat series. So number 400 is How We Eat Carnivore. Number 373, How We Eat Vegan Cat. Number 405, How We Eat Plant-Based. And today, of course, we'll be talking about a gluten-free diet, amongst many other things. Lindsay has had type 1 diabetes for a very long time. She's also had celiac for a really long time. Not as long as the diabetes, but still, you'll see. Today she's on the show to tell her story, and of course, we're going to talk about how she eats. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. I don't normally do this, but Lindsay, if you're listening, I just went back to see your initial email that you sent me, and your life is so full and rich, and we basically didn't talk about any of it. So you can come back on whenever you want. Send me an email. No kidding. We should never have talked about the celiac. Look at all this stuff. Boat captain. Is that what that says? Firefighter, business owner, skydiving, marathon. Does that say... Wait, hold on a second. It's a deckhand. A deckhand on a fishing boat, not a boat captain. I mean, I've never been on a boat, so that all kind of seems the same to me. Anyway, before we get started, let me just throw in my deep voice and tell you that nothing... No, that was already said that. Oh boy, here we go. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. Head over to dexcom.com/juicebox to learn more about the CGM that I think is life-changing for people who are using insulin. And of course, the insulin pump that my daughter's been using since she was 4 years old is the Omnipod. And it is a tubeless insulin pump. Why don't you check it out and even get them to send you a free no obligation demo by going to myomnipod.com/juicebox. While you're out there on the internet, check out touchedbytype1.org. It's a great little organization that does amazing things for people with type 1 diabetes, touchedbytype1.org, and you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. And the person who started Touched by Type 1 is going to be on the show in a couple of weeks.
My name is Lindsay. I live in New Jersey. I've been a type 1 since I was 6 years old. So for about 27 years. I just hit my 27th year in July. And I've been celiac for about 16 years.
Okay. How did the celiac present itself?
So when I switched doctors from a pediatric endocrinologist to an adult doctor when I was a teenager, they ran the celiac test as a random routine test for new patients. And the one marker did come back positive. Of course, when they do the blood work, it'll come back positive, but then it has to be confirmed with a biopsy through an endoscopy. Which was also done, and it was confirmed. I had no idea at the time what it was. I'd never heard of it. My mom had never heard of it. And we started from that point, totally gluten-free.
So were you living with type 1 for about a decade without understanding that you had celiac, do you think?
Yes, I do. And in looking back in hindsight, I always had just kind of like a funky stomach. I have no other way to describe it. Just very, very agitated. I was uncomfortable a lot, and I felt like it was a lot more than it should be. So all throughout elementary and middle school, I just was in a lot of discomfort.
Yeah.
And looking back now, I do believe that I was celiac positive at that point.
I'm trying to decide if you guys come on and try to name the shows while you're talking, because I'm very drawn to Funky Stomach as the title for this episode, just so you know.
I love it. I think it's a great title.
We'll have to work the word celiac in there somewhere so people understand why, but I think Funky Stomach is very strong. Okay, so that's what, it's so funny. You're going to be great at this because I had a question for you and you answered the question and just continued talking. I was like, oh, this is going to be easy for me. Thank God. But, okay, so let's put a little bit of context to Funky Stomach so that people who may be experiencing the same thing understand. What did you notice? What was happening?
What was that?
What did you notice? Like, what made you, like, did you eat something and then, or were you not connecting the dots in those first 10 years? Did you just think
in the first 10 years, I don't think I was connecting the dots at all, nor were my parents. I think we had been to the gastroenterologist and been to the doctor, and we were always really on top of my health all throughout my entire life, basically. But I think at that point, a lot of people didn't really think celiac. They didn't really think all of these other things that could be the problem. They just kind of would brush it off and say, oh, it's a funky stomach, or it's your genes, or, maybe you have a sensitivity, but we're not that concerned about it. So
they weren't that concerned, Lindsay. They weren't that concerned because they weren't in the bathroom with you after you ate. I bet you were concerned, right?
I know they weren't living with me.
Yeah.
And, I know a lot of other people with celiac and undiagnosed celiac say that they struggle like in the bathroom. They really are, their lives are affected terribly. And I don't think I was ever at that point. It didn't seem to be that drastic for me.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we just kind of brushed it off for the first 10 years. And then once we put the pieces together and once we got the diagnosis, it really all started to make sense. And the symptoms now that I know, they're bloating, they're discomfort, diarrhea, nausea. I never had any vomiting, but I was often very tired, just kind of lethargic, and those really do fit the bill.
Okay. So you eat something that doesn't, let's just say, agree with your system. And then what's the timing? How long does it take for symptoms to pop up? How long do they last?
So for celiac, for me, I would notice symptoms within about a half hour. I would say a half hour to an hour. And I really don't know how that's possible. And I've asked this question to my doctor several times. We've kind of come up with an answer, which is a whole other conversation that I can touch on. But the celiac affects your small intestine. So for food to get to your small intestine, it's going to take quite a while. So I'm not really sure how I'm symptomatic in such a small frame of time. But the one thing that I was going to mention is that I have figured out some other foods that I've had issues with, which has led me to also being on a low FODMAP diet, which is an acronym for different types of carbohydrates that are difficult to digest.
Okay.
And that's really where like a lot of different discomfort was coming from as well.
Okay. All right. So you eat something, it hits you pretty quickly. Discomfort comes in all the ways that you described. Does it last for hours, days?
It will last for days. So if I eat something with gluten in it, I will have severe just exhaustion, achiness, almost flu-like or mild flu-like symptoms, just feeling absolutely terrible. And that will last for me for probably a couple of days. And the only thing I would be able to do to try and help that along is just hydrate, drink a ton of water. I exercise a lot, so I would do my best to really continue exercising. I feel like that can only help, and just do your best to filter out whatever toxins, I have in my body.
It's crazy. It really is strange. And I'm assuming if you don't understand that this is why it's happening for food reasons, then you probably eat something that makes it keep going daily, right? There's probably no really getting out of it back before you understand it. It's just, you just think you have a funky stomach.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I see.
For me, I love food. I've always been a great eater, even when I was a baby. So we were eating all sorts of different foods. And when I was little, we were traveling and we were just having a ball. And, I felt like everything I ate affected me negatively in some way.
Because at some point, probably in every meal, you had something, even if it wasn't everything, you had something that was impacting you.
Oh, for sure.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. And now knowing what it is, gluten will hide in so many different things that people don't even know it's in. It's really quite interesting.
Tell me about that. Where would it exist? Like I would think of bread, right? I'd be like, oh, I guess Lindsay doesn't eat pizza and things like that. But where is it that we don't think of it?
So other things would be different kinds of sauces. So some salad dressings, like thick pasta sauces, like a vodka sauce, Alfredo sauce, soups. A lot of soups have wheat flour and gluten in it. It's really a thickener. It's a protein, so it binds food. It makes food thick and yummy and delicious. And unfortunately, those are off the table. A lot of people, we eat a lot of sushi, so a lot of people don't realize soy sauce has wheat in it. Beer, a lot of different alcoholic beverages if you're over 21. And of course, bread, any kind of carby or starchy food.
Would it be easier to list the things that don't have gluten in it?
Yeah. It would. And it's really like vegetables, fruit, chicken, fish, steak. Those things are naturally gluten-free. Mm-hmm. And then over the years, and since I was diagnosed, it's become a real market for food. So there's so many different options now. So we have breads and pastas and all sorts of sweet treats and anything we could possibly imagine.
It's an autoimmune disease. Is that right?
It is, yes.
Okay. Is that your only other autoimmune? Just type 1 and celiac?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. And so is it the lining in the, like, I know you said the small intestines, but it's something about the lining in the small intestines. Is it they're like flattened out or something like that, or?
Yeah. So your small intestine has lining. They're made up of small little finger-like objects called villi. And when a celiac patient eats gluten, the body attacks that gluten as an invader, and the villi will become flattened out. So normally they're like hair-like structures. They absorb things, they catch things as they travel through the small intestine, and they will become flattened out over time, which really then causes inflammation, damage, and then of course other things from that point, which would be malabsorption of anything that you're eating, anemia, and all sorts of different other problems.
So then you start, once this happens, once the gluten attacks that lining and starts flattening it out and causing all these other problems, you're also going to start having trouble absorbing other nutrients as well.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And a lot of patients with celiac who are undiagnosed are really quite underweight or just very unhealthy. They obviously, I would think most of them feel terrible, and they're not thriving.
Yeah, that's very interesting and timely for me, because if you're listening to the podcast, I don't think I've said it out loud like completely yet, because I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about it. But I've learned that it's possible I have a genetic problem where I can't absorb iron correctly.
Okay. Yep.
And so I've had a lot of these different tests, the endoscopy, the other way, you know.
Lovely.
Yeah. I've swallowed a camera. That was fun. Wore like this purse around my neck for a bunch of hours, and I could just pick it up and look at this little screen and watch the camera go through my system. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the camera came out, Lindsay.
I'm glad it came out though.
Yeah, I'm just saying that part I wasn't as thrilled about. And but it's very interesting that these two things, they do sort of mimic each other. I have just started the process of getting involved in a study for people who don't absorb iron that's happening out of Boston Children's, I think.
Okay.
And we might be figuring out that my son has it as well.
Oh, wow.
But it's very interesting to see too how it affects me, but he being younger and more kind of, vital than I am, obviously, where he can kind of overpower some of the symptoms, unlike this, where this would just down anybody. It's just really fascinating that it's all the idea of your immune system seeing something incorrectly. Like just it's seeing the gluten incorrectly. That's the entirety of the problem. Is that really it?
I believe so, to the best of my knowledge, yes. And it is very interesting. It's very scary. Autoimmune diseases, as you know, there's just so many question marks and there's so many of them and nobody really knows why this seems to happen.
Yeah.
It's quite scary.
Why did people stop calling it celiac sprue?
I really don't know. I think people are just getting a little bit more used to it now. So they're just calling it celiac.
My wife's grandmother had it. Excuse me. And if you asked her what was wrong, she'd be like, I've got the sprue. And that
I think I'm going to start saying that, actually.
Yeah, just start telling people you have the sprue.
Really interesting.
I have the sprue. I'm going to read for a second. An autoimmune reaction to eating gluten, a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. Over time, the immune reaction to eating gluten creates inflammation that damages the small intestine's lining, leading to medical complications. It also prevents absorption of some nutrients. The classic symptoms of, like you mentioned, diarrhea. Other symptoms include bloating, gas, fatigue, low blood count, anemia, osteoporosis. And many people can have this without symptoms. That's interesting. A mainstay of treatment is strict gluten-free diet that can help manage symptoms and promote intestinal healing. Okay, so once you figure this all out and you switch to a gluten-free diet, back before it was hip to say you weren't eating gluten, and before it was hip, I'm assuming it was difficult to find things that didn't have gluten in it. What did you do in the beginning?
I remember it being very difficult. I remember really going through a whole extensive list of foods that I was going to have to eliminate from my diet. And being in high school, I was kind of in denial about it. I was like, this isn't really a big deal. I'll figure it out. And maybe I'll have sneak a cookie here and there if I really want one. That didn't last very long because once I realized what I was doing to myself, just with one cookie, I really kind of had like a total 180. I couldn't continue on that path. So we eliminated, and we, meaning my parents and I, a lot of different foods, and we had to just totally navigate the food store in a different way. At that point, there was some pasta that was out, which was made from quinoa, and maybe some rice pasta. But other than that, there wasn't much of anything at all.
Okay. Yeah. And now there's a ton of stuff, but it's expensive, right?
Yeah. There is a ton of stuff, and it's pretty exciting. And I always tell people, like, being celiac for so long now, it really makes food more exciting. If I find like a cupcake that I can eat or a really great bakery, it's just the most exciting day, like of the year. So, that's definitely the positive, but one of the negatives is, yes, it is very expensive. But when you don't have a choice, you just
no, of course. I was wondering if you can't submit your grocery bill to your health insurance company. That'd be interesting.
That would be interesting. We can, as far as I know, and I think I do still do this, but we can write off gluten-free foods from our taxes. But your write-offs are not super significant with that stuff.
Yeah. Write-offs are more exciting to talk about than they are when you watch how they kind of come together in your tax situation. You're like, I did all this, I have that, and the guy comes back and he tells me, he's like, oh yeah, it's a good thing you sent all this stuff in because it decreased your bill by, and I'm like, that's not enough money. Like, what are you talking about?
No, No, it's like $100 or something.
Yeah,
It's
that's
totally
not exciting.
negligible.
No, you didn't excite me with that. But that's
No.
interesting that you can do that. Okay, so what's a day's worth of meals like for people who are listening right now who may think they have this, and what do you get to eat, and did you eventually get accustomed to it? All right, I feel some fast talking coming on. I'm going to get through all the ads without stopping. Here we go. The Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor is a staple in my daughter's life. We make decisions about insulin dosing, direction, and speed of her blood sugar, all from the Dexcom G6. I can watch it on my iPhone. If you had an Android, you could watch it from there as well. Arden loves it. She loves not having to do her finger sticks. She loves being able to see the speed and direction of her blood sugar. She loves that we can pre-bolus and make good decisions about her meals that keep her blood sugars in a stable range. There's no more guessing about where your blood sugar is or if it's moving when you have the Dexcom, because you can see the speed and direction. And a moment ago, I said I can see Arden's blood sugar on my phone. Well, that's because she can share her information, if she wants to, with up to 10 followers. This is for Android or iPhone. Please take it from me when I tell you that I was not nearly as good at diabetes before Dexcom as I am now with it. Check it out at dexcom.com/juicebox. There are actually links in the show notes of your podcast player and at juiceboxpodcast.com if you can't remember the link. Now, onto the Omnipod. My daughter started wearing it when she was 4 because I didn't want to send her to school on shots. So we got her on it before kindergarten started, and we have never looked back. She is 16 right now, and she has worn an Omnipod every day for the last 12 years. And it's been a friend the entire time. She's worn it while she's swimming, while she's running, while she's playing softball, taking a shower, and doing all of the other things that everyone does every day. Omnipod gives you the freedom to hide the pod if you want, or to wear it out where people can see it. It doesn't matter. It's completely flexible with your needs. And there's no tubing. You are not connected to a device or a controller when you're using the Omnipod, and that is an amazing feeling of freedom. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Omnipod would be thrilled to send you a free and no obligation demo of the pod right now. They'll send it to your house so you can wear it and see. If you don't like it, it's cool. And if you do, you can just keep going. It's amazing. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Speaking of amazing, Elizabeth Forrest started Touched by Type 1 a very long time ago, and she is building an amazing machine over there, a machine that helps people with type 1 diabetes. I told you earlier, Elizabeth is going to be on the show pretty soon, but in the meantime, you can check out what she and the organization are doing at touchedbytype1.org. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a little thing for Touched by Type 1 at the end of February, and if you'd like to come, you can just go to their website and sign up. It's absolutely free. Touchedbytype1.org, go to programs, then upcoming events, and there it is, February 26th, Bold with Insulin Live. They're also, by the way, on Facebook and Instagram, so check them out. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well, but I didn't buy an ad on the show, so I'm probably not allowed to talk about it here. I should probably ask the boss. I just heard back, and it turns out if I wanted to talk about my Facebook and Instagram here, I'm allowed to. I'm at Juicebox Podcast on Instagram and Bold with Insulin on Facebook. That's the public page, and the private page is Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. And I have a blog, juiceboxpodcast.com. Actually, there's diabetesprotip.com as well if you just want the Diabetes Pro Tip episodes, as well as the Defining Diabetes stuff. I mean, it's all right there in your podcast player, but there's a quicker way to it if you're just looking for them. diabetesprotip.com.
Absolutely. I did get accustomed to it. I did. It took me a little while to really get into a groove with what I like to eat and what I didn't like to eat. I mean, right now, there's so many options. So there's so many different choices for people. But a day's worth of food for me, breakfast, I often have like a piece of gluten-free toast with almond butter. I eat eggs a lot. So eggs are gluten-free. Protein shakes. I found, some protein that it's vegan and gluten-free and it doesn't upset my stomach. Lunch, I eat fruit. I eat yogurts. I'm also dairy free, so I'm just going to throw that out there. So all my yogurts are coconut and almond and non-dairy. And I feel like I have a huge variety of food that I choose from, but I'm like not thinking of all of them right now. I mean, we eat a lot of food in this house, so
Okay.
We're definitely not eating.
What happens? Like, are you married?
Not yet, but hopefully soon. If he's listening from the other room, maybe he can take that as a hint.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I can try. What's his name?
No, Brian.
Brian, buy a ring. What are you doing? There you go. Maybe you heard that. But that's my question: is the people that you live with, do they have to eat this way with you too, or is it just impossible to not? Or do you just make 2 meals? How do you manage?
So he eats gluten-free with me as well. We aren't a totally gluten-free household. So he has his own bread and English muffins, and he has his own beer. So some things are in the house that are not gluten-free. But when I make a meal and I do most of the cooking, I will just prepare a gluten-free meal. So he enjoys the pasta. He really can't tell the difference. Desserts, really the same thing. He'll eat everything and he has no complaints about it. So it just makes it a little bit easier when you're making full meals.
You're cooking and he hasn't bought a ring? That's all I heard, just in case you're wondering. I would love for someone to cook for me.
Very soon.
I have to be honest.
He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I want somebody to cook for me is really what I'm saying. Here's what you get when you're cooking, as near as I can tell. No one knows how much effort goes into it. And if they don't like it, they're very quick to tell you, this wasn't very good. And you're like, oh, well, it still took me 3 hours. So I really appreciate you saying that. Seriously.
It's not fair.
Do you find yourself trying to approximate quote unquote food from before in a gluten way, in a non-gluten way? Or like you said there's a pasta that doesn't have gluten in it, but is there a way to just throw away, modern eating, and like how would you do that? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean like if we just didn't have the pasta?
Well, no, I guess what I'm saying is that there's a way people think about eating, right? Like, and you'll say to someone, well, you can't have gluten anymore. And they're like, oh, and they start thinking no bread, no pasta, all these other things. But is there a way to just walk away from them and go, I just don't eat bread anymore. I don't need a bread that doesn't have gluten in it. And what would that look like if you just walked away from modern foods and went to things that didn't have gluten in it? Would you just be chewing on sticks and eating steaks? Or like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to really understand what a person would do if they couldn't afford to buy what I'm assuming is a very expensive cupcake so that it actually tastes like a cupcake and doesn't have gluten in it.
Yeah, it's very true. That is very expensive. The foods, and especially the really well-made desserts and products, they're expensive. So it is unfortunate that there is a difference there. If somebody was to really just totally eliminate any kind of gluten item or trying to buy the gluten-free items, you would have all natural and all things made from the earth, basically vegetables, fruits, meats, chicken, fish. Rice is a big one. I'm not sure, I think rice is pretty easily attainable. But yeah, you would probably eat really, really well as long as you balance things out as much as possible.
In just a way that we would consider like clean, no additives. It is what you see there. This is rice. This is a steak. There's nothing else that has been put into it or added. There's no anything else to it. This is it. The basics, like staples.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And it really would be a wonderful way to go about eating gluten-free, in my opinion. I think you probably feel better overall as long as you're choosing the right veggies and fruits and, whatever works for you, especially with the type 1. I think it would be great. And a lot of people with celiac have kind of like rose-colored glasses about the gluten-free food. A lot of it is really not great for you. There are other things that have to be added to make it, soft and mushy and sweet and this and that. So just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean that it is healthy. There are things that you can eat on occasion, but I don't think it's any better for you than the non-gluten-free option.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was going through all the testing to figure out my iron issue, the one time the doctor just says to me, look, you don't appear to have a gluten sensitivity at all. He goes, but let's test it. And I was like, okay. And so he says, so for a month, eat gluten-free. And I did. And I put on weight I went broke, I felt like, and I put on weight is how I felt, and didn't feel any differently. Cause of course I don't have celiac. So it was an interesting month of I didn't find it to be off-putting. Like there is some bread that's fantastically good that doesn't have gluten in it. Oh yeah. I figured that out. But then I started learning what you were talking about, which is there's just gluten in things that you don't expect. And so, but anyway, it's just, I gained a few pounds, and I was like, that's fascinating, because in my mind I thought, oh, I'm eating healthier.
Right.
And you just said it, it's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of other things that are going in, I'm assuming, that have calories in them to try to make flavor in different ways. Is that kind of the idea?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think I can't speak for every single product, but I think a lot of the gluten-free products out there are probably more calorie dense than some of the non-gluten-free counterparts. I think that it's not so much bad stuff, but it's just more stuff, potentially in some products, when people think they are actually doing better for themselves, which if they're eating gluten-free, they are. But of course, loading up on all sorts of different gluten-free treats is not better for you.
Yeah. You're sort of trading one problem for another one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite words that I don't particularly understand, FODMAP. What does that mean when people say I'm going to do like a low FODMAP diet?
So a low FODMAP diet, I don't have all of the words for each part of the FODMAP acronym.
Oh, don't worry. You talk. I'll Google.
Fermentable oligo something. There are certain kind of carbohydrate that just simply are not well broken down and digested, also by the small intestine. So a lot of times this food, and it's not, it's other food like apples and different sweeteners, like I think xylitol is one, Brussels sprouts, all sorts of different foods. They're not well broken down, and they end up kind of sitting in your intestinal tract, and they start to almost like ferment, which of course causes inflammation, bloating, gassiness, discomfort. Oh. And when I was diagnosed celiac, that was one thing. And then I ended up eliminating dairy several years later, which I was having some issues with. And then a few years after that, I kind of honed in with my gastro on this low FODMAP diet. And once I did that, I felt amazing. And It's been quite some time now where I've been on this diet, or I don't even like to call it a diet, but following this lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And I feel like 100%.
Okay, let me take a shot at this, right? No one laugh at me. FODMAP is an acronym for fermentable oligo dimonosaccharides and polyols.
That sounds right.
Does it? That can't possibly be right. But they are short chain carbohydrates that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine and prone to absorb water and ferment in the colon. I don't think we want anything fermenting in our colon ever. That's I'm going to make that statement right here and now.
No, you don't.
So I'm trying to get a feeling for what would be on a low FODMAP diet.
So the things that I really eat a lot of, broccoli, sweet potatoes, those are all low in FODMAPs.
Mm-hmm.
Blueberries, raspberries, non-dairy foods are low FODMAP. So we drink almond milk in the house, and any kind of non-dairy, substance.
Yeah.
Brown rice, almond and peanut butter, eggs. Those are all low FODMAP.
Okay. So I've found one now that I'm looking at, and it's funny. We don't, we buy milk that has no lactose in it just because it seemed like the thing to do. And nobody really drinks milk all that often here.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how this chart I found is set up. It says avoid excess fructose, lactose, a bunch of different vegetables that I guess you wouldn't expect: asparagus, beetroot, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, eggplant, garlic, onions, shallots. Those are avoids.
Yeah. So I eat broccoli with no problem, which is interesting. But yeah, like tomatoes and onions, avocados bother me. I think they're on the list as well.
Did you just do what the kids call, what is that called when you're showing off, but you're trying to act like you're not? Damn it, I can't think of it. I'm so not a kid. But you were just like, I eat Brussels sprouts, like you were a superhero.
I'm so cool. Me and my broccoli over here.
Oh, yeah, broccoli, no trouble here. I could knock it down like it's nothing. A lot of polyols. Apples, apricots, avocados. Oh, that's really interesting. But then the other side of it says you can enjoy, and then it gives you a whole list of things like, don't feel bad because you could have a mandarin. That's really interesting. The vegetables are more bamboo shoots, alfalfa, beet shoots, celery. Does anyone enjoy celery?
I do.
Do
so
you?
Funny you say that. I just said yesterday how much I love celery, and I'm sure everybody's going to make fun of me for saying that. So.
Lindsay loves celery. Strong second episode title right there. Oh, parsnips. You can finally, hey, listen, everybody, you can finally learn what a parsnip is.
What a great day.
This is your time. Go on Facebook later and tell people about it. I know what a parsnip is. I'm low FODMAP. You'll make all kinds of friends. But the real story here is that you say you feel amazing.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I was really struggling with the biggest thing that I struggled with was the FODMAP issue. And the one example I can think of is for years, I was having a protein shake after a workout or in the morning for breakfast. And I would put peanut butter and blueberries and whatever, almond milk in it. And it was a couple hours later, I would be just so uncomfortable. I would be so bloated, just uncomfortable, gassy, bloated, whatever. So I spent a year trying to figure out what the heck it was. And it was the protein powder. It was the vegan protein powder was made from pea protein, which is, I really think it's the most common vegan, like plant-based protein powder. The pea protein was killing me. And I now know that, and it's like eliminated so many issues for me. I use rice protein, which doesn't cause any kind of adverse reactions.
No kidding. By the way, the thing I was trying to think of earlier, humble brag.
Do you hear my Omnipod beeping in the background here?
I do. Are you putting it on right now?
No, I had it. I don't know. Oh, it's expiring. Here we go.
Oh. Dun, 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 dun. That beep, right? Dun, 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 dun. You're like, I'm getting it. Calm down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Relax over here. I hear you.
All right. So you found a guy who's willing to do it with you, not by a ring, but he's willing to eat gluten-free. That's nice. And and you feel 1,000,000% better. Talk about a little bit, what is it like to tell another person you're gluten-free, especially when it became chic for a while? Did people look at you sideways, or do you just keep it to yourself?
I felt that way. Yeah. I felt that people were getting a little judgy with me, just because I always worry that people think I'm doing it just to kind of get attention or to stand out. And that's not the case at all. I don't want that extra attention and care like from, random people or from anybody. So that was really my biggest concern. Telling people initially, I'm kind of outgoing, so I don't really have a problem talking about it. The same thing with type 1. I really don't have any issues talking about it, but I always do wonder if people think I'm just like exaggerating something or, being difficult.
Right. No, I mean, it did really become like chic is the word. Like everybody stopped eating. Like, I'm not going to eat gluten. I farted once. I'm not going to eat gluten anymore. Like that kind of thing. I mean, and it is a common thing. When I was looking earlier, it's that there's more than 200,000 cases a year in the U.S., which makes it a common ailment.
Wow.
But
yeah,
even when you say that, I mean, think of, you heard a lot more than 200,000 people tell you they don't eat gluten anymore, especially online where everybody's like, oh, I don't eat gluten. I don't do that. And I'm not saying like it seems to me that even if you don't have celiac, not eating gluten might be a really, healthy thing for you to do.
right.
Just because, isn't that interesting? Like what we're talking about here is a lot of foods that, are very, and I don't know how to talk about this correctly, but, processing wheat is not a thing we've been doing forever.
Right.
Like crushing wheat and turning it into flour and processing foods in general is still a more, hundreds of years, thousands of years thing, not millions of years thing. And so, I mean, there's just a list here of things that, you would eat if you were wandering around in America or somewhere else on the planet and trying to fend for yourself out of trees and bushes and things like that. No, seriously, right?
Yeah.
And then some brilliant guy comes along and figures out puff pastry, and now you can't poop right. It's not fair.
Yeah, it causes a whole bunch of problems, and who knows? A lot of people say that they do think, and there's been studies showing that could be considered part of the problem here. Personally speaking, I try and avoid as much processed food, gluten-free food as possible, but I also love to eat, and I love to eat well, and it has to balance. It has to be a balance.
Yeah.
But with people going gluten-free just voluntarily, there's a lot of people that do it, and I think a lot of people do it because they're also having issues. They're having digestive issues. They're bloated. They don't know what the heck is wrong. And hey, why not try it? See if it helps. And if it helps them, whatever.
And
that's good.
Is that considered like a gluten sensitivity if you don't have like the full blown,
Yeah. So gluten sensitivity would, as far as I understand it, would not be considered an autoimmune disease, but something's going on with your body just doesn't like the gluten protein.
Yeah. So that low FODMAP way of eating could help with other like gastrointestinal problems and like irritable bowel, bloating, stuff like that. Like it could really address a lot of different issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people with IBS and Crohn's do follow the low FODMAP diet. It as far as I've heard, it helps immensely with those issues.
I got to say, anything that stops something from fermenting in my colon, I think is probably a good idea. I try really hard. This last year, I've been, I should say, trying hard and succeeding in not eating processed foods. So I just sort of made a blanket statement to myself, like if it comes in a bag or a box, I stay away from it.
Right.
Even down to like, different oils. Like I won't use an olive oil that's heat pressed or processed. Right. I only use cold pressed, non-processed olive oil to cook with.
Right.
And it's made a difference. I am, since the beginning of the Corona outbreak, and I've said it on here a couple of times, but as we were all like kind of getting like locked into our houses, I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, yeah, this isn't going to go well for you, and
this is going to end bad.
Oh my God. I don't know if they'll be able to get me back out the door once they get me in the house. Right. And so I'm like, what do I do? And all I did was I cut out certain oils. Okay. I only use cold pressed, non-processed oil that I do use. And I'm eating on a what do they call that? It's weird that I'm doing it, and I say it to people all the time. And now when I need the word when I'm being recorded, I can't think of it. But holy hell, Lindsay, I only eat
like organic or not.
No, it's about the timing. This is embarrassing. I swear I'm actually doing it. What are they? Everyone listening right now is yelling. If this is what it's called, idiot. I don't even do it, and I know what it is. Intermittent fasting. I eat on an intermittent fasting schedule. So I choose 8 hours of the day, normally between 11 and 7, or if I get pinched in the morning, like from noon to 8, and I only eat in that time frame.
Okay.
And so beyond taking out processed stuff and only eat in that time frame, I haven't changed anything. And I might be closer to 30 pounds down since the beginning of Corona than not.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that interesting? And I'm not limiting myself during the 8 hours.
Good for you.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
Yeah. But as you're talking, and this whole series that I'm going to do here about different ways that people eat, I've just become very interested in it. Like someone had a Dorito the other day, and I looked at it and I thought, there would have been a time in my life where I would have seen a Dorito and thought to myself, those things are so fake and they taste like crap. And then I would have eaten a whole bag of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now somebody kind of like held the bag towards me. I was like, nah, I just wouldn't eat that.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting way you can watch your mindset sort of like change. And really, I think sugar is the last hill for me, honestly, because I still, if I get some sugar in me, I turn into like, I'm like the sugar version of a heroin addict. I'm just like, someone's like, oh, look, here's a little candy. And you're like, oh, a little candy. It tastes like cherries. And I put it in my mouth. And then I find myself wandering around the house going, where's that bag of little candies that taste like cherries?
You're done.
Find that bag so that I can eat every one of those things and make them go away so they stop tormenting me. You turn into Gollum pretty quickly.
Well, and that's like, it really is a lot of your mental status and your mental energy. You have to kind of change the way that you think. And once you turn that corner with maybe not having sweet stuff every day or whatever it is, you change. And once you start to feel better, then you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. What do you do do you have a sweet tooth? Do you ever get a craving?
Occasionally. I always say that I think my sweet tooth is like just very minimal because of type 1. We never really had a ton of sweet stuff in my house when I was growing up. And when I was first diagnosed, it was always like, just an occasional thing, holidays or whatnot. So I don't really have a sweet tooth. I love salty foods. So it's the same premise when you eat a lot of salt or add salt, you start wanting more and needing more to taste. So that's something that I have to keep an eye on.
Like you just can't get it. Like enough is never enough.
Right.
You just have to keep it like
popcorn.
Yeah.
I could just put salt on the popcorn like crazy and it would just, and then you feel terrible because you're like all bloated and
and you have to keep escalating to get the same high out of the salt. At some point, you're just going to start licking the salt shaker and then throwing the popcorn into your mouth.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I have a comparison that I'm not going to make here, but actually I'm going to make it and then I'll bleep it out for you. But it's like, right? Like you start with like, oh, this is nice. The two of them seem to like each other. And then by the end, you're like, can someone get a dog and a in here? And this just isn't doing it for me anymore.
It just totally goes off the rails.
Yeah. Lindsay, wait till you hear that played back all bleeped out and you can't figure out what we're talking about. Only you are going to get to laugh. Isn't that nice?
I'm honored. I cannot wait.
Oh my God. Anyway, okay. So yeah, I think that what I'm learning and what kind of drove me towards, because I have to say, like, if you do listen to the podcast, I really believe that anybody can do whatever they want. And it's possible that one of you out there is doing something that's really unhealthy for you, but that's your decision. I have no business making that decision for you. I just want you to understand how to manage your insulin while you're making the decisions you're eating about food. That's really my entire goal about the podcast, right?
Yes.
But I am becoming more interested in letting people describe the different ways that they eat, because I realize that there's huge segments of people who were going to eat gluten-free, and some people are going to do intermittent fasting, and some people are going to do, other ideas. And so I've tried to line up a lot of people. I've had a lot of success. Yours is the first one I'm recording, but
Awesome.
but I want people to come on and talk about their different, food eating styles. And I don't think of them as diets, really.
Right.
Just ways of eating that end up being beneficial to you. And, that's it. I mean, it could not have been fun, the 10 years you spent, struggling like that. And it's really amazing that you found something that works for you. So, I guess, spend a little bit of time here and tell me, is there any impact on your type 1 before you went gluten-free and after?
Not that I can remember. I don't remember having any adverse reactions before I was diagnosed, before I was gluten-free, compared to after. Although I was younger and it was quite some time ago, but nothing really stands out to me in great detail. I was diagnosed when I was 6, and I was doing injections for, up until about 2007 when I started on the Omnipod.
Okay.
And I've always been pretty on top of the diabetes. Of course, every day is different and a challenge, but my parents, I'm an only child, and my parents really took a lot of time with me when I was little to get me on the right track and make sure I understood how things were important, or, how to handle different things and whatnot.
So even though you were bloated and uncomfortable and making what I'm imagining is just horrible poops, it just your blood sugar control didn't suffer within that situation.
No, not that I can remember. Nothing that would have been really directly related to the celiac being undiagnosed.
Okay. Hey, listen, now that you're not gluten-free, do you ever stand up from the toilet, look in there and go, oh my God, that thing is perfect?
No.
You've never thought that? I make the greatest shits now? You've never had that thought?
Although, I'm sure I know people do that. And hey, I am not judging you. You should be proud of what you do.
I hear you. I think people should stand up and celebrate and be like, my God, look at that thing. Perfect size and shape. Came right out.
I'm so healthy.
Yeah, I'm so healthy. My daughter has a friend, Sanja. She calls, she'll say, Mr. Benner, did you have a ghost? And I'm like, what? And she goes, a ghost, when you don't really have to wipe. And I'm like, wait, that's what that is?
That's a great name.
I was like, is that an internet thing or did you make that up? And then I went,
that's amazing.
You're still wiping though, right? And she goes, oh yeah. But you know what I mean. And I'm like, I think I do, yes.
That is so awesome.
I think I do. It's funny, that girl's a vegan, but
okay.
But it's interesting because some of the ways she gets the vegan are less than healthy. And you made me think of her earlier when you were talking, you can eat a cupcake and say, that's wrapped in a piece of plastic that you bought in the grocery aisle that, could live through a nuclear war and go, I'm vegan.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. We're going to dig into all that. Okay. So, run me through a day. You get up in the morning. What do you eat for breakfast?
So most common breakfast would be a piece of gluten-free toast with almond butter or organic peanut butter.
Okay.
Sometimes I put some blueberries on top of it, and that's really going to be dependent on what my sugar is and what I'm doing afterwards. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I eat most mornings. Other mornings I'll have eggs and maybe a piece of toast, or I love sriracha on my eggs, so that's definitely one of my favorites.
Okay.
And then, do you want me to go through the whole thing?
Yeah, do you snack in mid-afternoon? Do you have lunch? What happens next?
Yeah, so I usually eat 3 square meals a day with some snacks mixed in, depending on my work schedule and depending on my sugar, obviously. Mm-hmm. Lunch, a lot of times, is a protein shake. So I'll have a protein shake with a little bit of dairy-free yogurt and a little bit of frozen fruit and some peanut butter. So that's lunch. And that's probably, I think that's about between 30 and 35 carbs, depending on the fruit. And Dinner, I mean, we could go crazy. We had sushi last night. We love steak. We love chicken, barbecue chicken, sweet potatoes, mashed sweet potatoes, butternut
Baked sweet
squash soup.
potatoes,
Yeah.
sweet potatoes au gratin without, of course, any cheese or milk or anything like that.
Yeah, you can make all of those like really good, yummy foods gluten and dairy free. It just may take a little bit more time and energy, but yeah, broccoli, salmon, fish, shrimp, crab legs. We love it.
Do
And
all that
then
stuff. Yeah.
I do usually have dessert, and of course, again, it's going to be dependent on my sugar and how late it is and a bunch of other things. Did I work out that day? um, but we'll have, oh gosh, I don't even know. A little bit of a gluten-free brownie or part of a cupcake or something like that.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you remember when we used to go to the movies? What did you get when you went to the movies? Did you bring something with you?
That's a really good question. I usually just get popcorn.
No, because you can have that.
Yeah.
So no problem.
Yeah.
Got it. You're not, do you find yourself smuggling food into places ever?
I do. I have at times, and in the past, it's actually more so been for dinner purposes. So if we go out to eat and I want to have some kind of pasta dish, I'd bring my own pasta. But there would have to be a conversation there with the restaurant or with the cook about using a different pot and making sure they're cooking it in a separate pot of water, basically. Because a lot of restaurants, they'll just cook all their pasta in the same pasta water. And that obviously would not work for someone with celiac. So,
yeah, because all that, everyone can imagine making pasta and there's that like thickness that happens in the water. That is, I guess, the gluten, right?
Yeah, that's the starch that comes off of that pasta noodle. And that's a whole other thing. I mean, eating out, there's a risk of cross-contamination. I always try and let them know. And of course, a lot of places are just more aware of these things right now, but you have to be super careful. And I'm not going to drive myself absolutely crazy. I'm not going to go in and inspect the kitchen and, demand all these crazy things, but you have to really be mindful, and you do have to hopefully trust that these people are doing the right thing.
Yeah. Is it one of those things where you can just tell like an hour later you're just, I don't know, let's say farting in the car and you think to yourself, there's no way they washed that pot.
Yeah. You'll know. You'll just I really wish I thought about this prior to talking to you, because I really don't know how else to say it other than just being really uncomfortable, especially as a woman. If you're going out to dinner and you're with your boyfriend or your friends and you're in a dress and heels or whatever, and you eat something that you shouldn't have, you're just like super uncomfortable. All you want to do is just rip your clothes off and get in your PJs and go to bed.
Go home. What? That makes me want to ask you, what's it like to have sort of a gluten issue on top of your period?
For me personally, I wouldn't really consider it any different than,
okay,
I guess, what it should be. Yeah, I don't think there's any change there.
There's only so much bloating and uncomfortableness the body can make, I guess.
Yeah. There's a limit there. I try my best for me, exercising is what eliminates that stuff. Even if I'm super uncomfortable, I try and just keep moving and keep drinking water. And those two things for me seem to help eliminate a lot of those issues.
Yeah. Is there any other physical symptoms? Like, I don't know, I'm making things up, but joint pain, headaches, or does it all just pretty much stay in your belly and your digestive tract?
Yeah, there's a plethora of other symptoms that people have. Occasionally through my life, I have gotten them. Of course, I wouldn't know 100% if they were celiac related or if I had eaten gluten at the time. But the most common other symptoms for celiac would be the joint pain. Absolutely, like an arthritic feeling. People start losing hair. People get dizzy and have blurred vision. And there's also a type of dermatitis, like a skin rash, that would be directly caused by gluten. So people do break out in rashes and all sorts of different things. I'm on a bunch of different Facebook forums for celiac and celiac type 1s. And I see people asking about all sorts of different things you would never even think of.
Well, I'm going to ask you this because I'm in the middle of trying to help Arden with something. If I said to you, it feels like your bones are bruised, is that a feeling you've ever had?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. Or maybe for somebody who goes out and likes to party, maybe feeling hungover. I think that's another good comparison. Just exhausted, terrible, watery eyes, headache, achy, kind of just flu-like.
Can't get
feeling.
rested?
Yeah.
Neck stiffness, muscles, or no?
Not so much for me, but absolutely.
I've heard it from other people.
All of these different patients present with all these different symptoms that seem kind of far out there, but I do think that they are all related to celiac if undiagnosed.
There's part of me that thinks I should just put Arden on an IV drip for a month and then let her stop eating. We can just take her back to like 0 and start over again.
Yeah.
Did you have to do an elimination diet at first, or did you just cut everything out?
We did our best to just cut everything out. I don't remember. I remember having the conversations with my parents. I remember them going through all of these different foods that we were going to eliminate and that we were going to keep. And I don't remember like throwing out the kitchen at that time and starting from 0. But I know that that's pretty much what we had to do.
Okay. That's interesting. It really is. I appreciate you talking about this. It's obviously personal, but you were really excited to help when I kind of put the call out. And I appreciate that very much.
Of course.
It's something I just don't understand.
I was just going to say, I love the podcast. I am somewhat new to it. I think it's been a couple of months, actually, maybe since Corona started. And being a diabetic for 27 years, it has changed so much of the way that I think about things, because you do, and I know you've discussed this before, you do fall into certain patterns and just you get complacent with things sometimes. And it really, you've helped me. So I'm happy to chat here with you.
That's very nice. I was wondering if we were going to take a couple minutes to talk about how terrific I was, and this is really a good time for it.
Yeah, you've been great. I really do appreciate all that you do.
I'm kidding, but thank you. And I'm glad I have to say I'm kidding for the 5 people who are like, don't understand sarcasm, and they're right now running to like a review somewhere and go, this guy is so full of himself and he just said that he's great. And I'm like, all right, I heard you. You guys got to get out to the East Coast once in a while, talk to other people. Lindsay knows, she's from right around here. We could probably have done this in person, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm really thrilled that the podcast has been helpful for you. And the complacency is something that I find in my own life all the time, where you just sort of, you get that drift up and you're like, it's only 160. Yeah, it's fine. And then before you know it, it's 3 weeks later, and, you've got some app that tells you your A1C, has gone up, a half a point, and your variability is growing and your standard deviation's getting bigger. And you just think, well, what should I do? And you look and you go, I just probably need some more basil here. And then you're done. And it's, something it's pretty easy, just hard to see in the moment. It's one of the macro things where you have to step back and see the whole thing and get out of this minute to minute, fight that you're in and start thinking about the whole war, I guess, for the.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is just really how the human brain handles things. You start something and it's kind of working and you go with it, and then it just continues and maybe gets worse, and you can always do better. And that's definitely been brought to light.
Well, how else, right? Could you put yourself in a situation where that having a slice of pizza is going to send you into like stomach cramps and 2 hours in the bathroom, and still the next time you see a pizza, just go, all right, and just do it again. Because you start feeling like, well, I guess this is how my life is. And I guess it doesn't need to be, especially if you have beet shoots. Then
I mean, I there's no comparison.
If I opened your refrigerator, would I just be like, I don't recognize any of these foods?
No, you would be. I'm sure you'd be fine.
This has a face. What is this?
What is this?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, it's very nice that you're. I guess, well, I was going to say fiance, but obviously not. your guy friend, which I'm assuming is what your mom calls him, is that boy. It's very nice that he's doing it with you. As much as he can. Like, yeah, I know you said he has separate foods that are his, but it's very cool, and I think that it just to have support around this sort of thing, I don't think can probably be undervalued, because you probably felt already pretty alone with diabetes, and then you add this, and am I wrong, or?
You're right. The support in any situation, diabetes, celiac, or anything in life is really just so important. And even not just with him, but with his family and his parents and our friends, all of our friends they know and they're mindful. So it's just nice to know that it's nice to know when people think about you, and maybe go out of their way to get you something, or, make dinner a little bit more special, for you. And it's lovely.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Hey, are there people who do a better job with gluten-free foods than others? Like, do you sometimes eat it and just like, does your tongue just come out of your mouth and you just let it fall out of your mouth thinking like, oh, yeah, this is terrible? Or like, where do you find a gluten-free bakery? I guess I'm saying, like, how did you track them down?
There's a few, there's actually several in New Jersey. There's one down south. It's about an hour and a half from me. And there are several up, kind of close to the city. And of course there's a whole bunch of places in the city. So I've just found them through talking to people and Facebook, and, it's amazing. I mean, I will drive an hour and a half. Actually, I've run a marathon, and after the marathon was done, I had my mom waiting there with a cinnamon bun. But prior to that, we drove an hour and a half just to get a couple of cinnamon buns for the end of the race, because it's just such an exciting venture to have like this gooey icing covered cinnamon roll.
See, when you simplify your life, small things can be very exciting. And that's
it's so true.
Yeah, it's really cool. Do you see yourself having a breakdown ever? Or do you think this is something you can just easily do your whole life?
It's something that I will do my whole life.
Yeah.
I won't ever voluntarily break down and eat something that's not gluten-free. Especially now. I am 33, and we, not right away, but we would like to have a baby one day. And I definitely don't want to jeopardize my health in any way.
Yeah.
So this is it.
Good for you. Well, I think it's interesting to hear you speak, and I'm hoping that other people coming on are going to kind of follow similarly, that you're not a zealot or a lunatic. And, because I think there are some people who could easily think, oh, you don't eat gluten, just must be just a raving loon, and you're just clearly a very normal, nice person. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. You're from Jersey. How could you be a bad person?
This is true.
By the way, are you from here? Because no one's really from here, are they?
Oh, I'm from here.
Oh, wow. I didn't think anybody was born in New Jersey. I thought we just all ended up here somehow.
We just got lost and ended up here.
Yeah. Well, I always just think it's a job. Like you get a job and you move to New Jersey, or you don't want to live in the city, so you're going to commute. And that's true. Yeah. I just thought of this as like a holding place for other people, but
yeah.
But I guess now my kids are born in New Jersey, so they're from here.
Yep.
Got to live with that shame now.
It's a good thing.
No, I actually like it here a lot. I don't have any trouble with New Jersey whatsoever.
No, yeah, absolutely not.
We have pharmaceutical companies and banks and those circles to make left turns with. We have all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, all of our rules and driving habits are like
very strange,
foreign to the rest of the country.
Yeah. And what about those beaches where the water doesn't get warm? That's lovely.
So funny.
God. Did we not say anything that you are going to, like 5 seconds from now when I say goodbye, go, oh my God, how did I not say this? Or do you think we did a good job here of explaining it to people?
Actually, yeah, there was one thing that I did want to discuss real quick, was that when I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I know the podcast has discussed this before. I had chicken pox prior to the type 1 diagnosis, and the doctors all thought that was related. When I was diagnosed with celiac, I had been in a stressful kind of life-changing and not necessarily negative stress, but a very stressful long-term situation. And all of my doctors also felt that stress did kind of bring out the celiac. Your immune system was maybe a little bit compromised and something just clicked, and that's how it happened. So I've read that a lot. My doctors have also kind of agreed with that. And I think that's something to just know that a lot of people say if you're sick or if you're under a lot of pressure or stress, that may be the cause of some of these things, or not the cause, but what actually brings it out.
Yeah. So everyone sit in the middle of a dark room and hum to yourself for the rest of your life. That's it.
Just don't do anything.
Yeah. No more interacting. Turn the news off too, by the way.
Please. Yeah.
No, it is interesting because as we've been working with Arden and she's getting more frequent blood draws as she's trying to figure stuff out, every once in a while, like her, like, it's like I don't know, it's not like on any schedule, but like you'll see her white blood cells pop up like she's fighting some sort of an infection or something like that. But you don't see it in her life. Like you wouldn't look at her and go, oh, she's sick right now, or something like that. But she'll have these white blood cells that indicate an infection fight, and then the next time she has the blood draws, everything's perfect again.
Right.
And it's just interesting. You don't know what your body's going through, and the way I like to think about food is this, and I'll leave everyone with this, and I'm certainly not the gold standard for this idea, but I'm trying to be. Just because your body can process it doesn't mean you should eat it.
Absolutely.
Right? Just because it goes in your mouth and comes out the other side and you're still alive when it's over doesn't make it a good idea. Not all the time. So I'm trying to figure out what those things are for me, and I think everyone should be doing their best to consider what those things are for them.
I agree. I think that's a great way to think.
Yeah. Go. I really appreciate you doing this. Would you hold on for 1 second? And
sure.
Thank you. A huge thank you to Lindsay for coming on the show and sharing all that she knows about type 1 diabetes and celiac disease. Thanks also to Dexcom, makers of the G6 continuous glucose monitor, and Omnipod, makers of the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. I also want to thank Touched by Type 1. You'll be able to find all the sponsors at juiceboxpodcast.com or in the show notes of your podcast player. But if you want Dexcom, it's dexcom.com/juicebox. Omnipod is myomnipod.com/juicebox and touchedbytype1.org.